The late afternoon sun cast long, lazy shadows across my meticulously kept lawn as I pulled into my driveway. The scent of freshly cut grass, a symphony of summer cicadas, and the familiar sight of my thriving garden usually greeted me with a sense of peace after a long day at the architectural firm. Today, however, a stark white envelope impaled on my front door, fluttering slightly in the gentle breeze, immediately shattered that tranquility. My stomach clenched. It was a notice from the Hemlock Estates Homeowners Association, their official emblem, a stylized oak tree, ironically stamped on the top. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I, Mike Jennings, at 38 years old, considered myself a reasonable man, a responsible homeowner. I prided myself on maintaining my property, a charming two-story house with a sprawling backyard, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac. I'd lived here for 5 years, embracing the suburban dream, even the quirks of HOA living. I usually received the standard, polite reminders about trash cans being out too early or holiday lights staying up too long. But this felt different. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled the envelope free. Inside, a single sheet of paper, coldly typed, cited me for a violation. Non-approved tree. My brow furrowed in confusion. Non-approved tree? I scanned the document again, my eyes latching onto the specific detail. Large deciduous tree, located approximately 15 feet from front property line, east side. My gaze instinctively drifted towards the majestic sugar maple that dominated that very spot. Its leaves, currently a vibrant emerald green, already hinting at the fiery transformation they would undergo in the prow. Autumn. This tree, a grand old sentinel, had been here for longer than the HOA itself, probably longer than most of the houses in the development. It was an established part of the landscape, a natural monument. How could it possibly be note approved? A wave of annoyance, sharp and immediate, washed over me. This was bureaucratic overreach, pure and simple. The HOA rules were extensive, yes, but they mostly pertained to new plantings, architectural modifications, or exterior paint colors. To suddenly target an ancient, healthy tree felt utterly absurd, a ridiculous exercise in power. I pictured the usual suspects on the HOA board, a collection of individuals who seemed to derive an inordinate amount of pleasure from enforcing minor infractions. And then, my mind landed on Karen Fields. Karen, a woman in her early 60s with a formidable bob and an equally formidable sense of self-importance, lived directly to my east, her property line bordering mine along where the maple stood. She was the unofficial, self-appointed arbiter of neighborhood aesthetics, the kind of person who meticulously tracked how long Christmas decorations remained up and reported overgrown rose bushes with the zeal of a PA. Federal agent. We'd had polite, yet strained, interactions over the years. Her side of our shared fence was always immaculate, her lawn a verdant carpet, her flower beds bursting with symmetrical, color-coordinated blooms. My own garden, a bit wilder, a little more natural, often seemed to rub her the wrong way, though she never explicitly said anything. Could this be her doing? The thought simmered, adding a layer of personal affront to the impersonal HOA citation. I reread the notice. It demanded the tree be removed or brought into compliance within 30 days or face escalating fines. Compliance? How does one bring a deeply rooted, decades-old maple tree into compliance without removing it? The absurdity of it all was maddening. I decided then and there that I wouldn't simply comply. This wasn't about a tree. It felt like a challenge, an arbitrary assertion of control. My introspection told me this was a test, and I wasn't about to fail. The first step, I reasoned, was to understand the exact nature of the problem. If it was truly about an unapproved tree, Perhaps there was some obscure clause about species or size. I meticulously reviewed the Hemlock Estate's HOA covenants, a thick binder of regulations I usually only skimmed. I pored over sections on landscaping, tree removal, and new plantings. Nowhere, not a single line, mentioned existing mature trees requiring approval. New trees, yes. Removal, yes. But a tree that predated the development? No mention. The more I read, the more the citation felt baseless, a malicious fabrication. My suspicion about Karen deepened. The tree, after all, was close to our shared property line. I recalled several instances where I'd seen her, or her landscapers, trimming branches from the maple, branches that clearly extended over her side of the line. She'd also, on occasion, dumped bags of excess mulch around the base of the tree on her side, a practice I hadn't thought much of at the time, assuming it was simply part of her gardening routine. Now, these memories took on a new, darker hue. Could she be trying to get rid of the tree because it cast too much shade on her meticulously curated prize-winning petunias? The idea, while petty, felt entirely within the realm of possibility for Karen. A sudden, unsettling thought struck me. What if the tree wasn't entirely on my property? The citation mentioned it was approximately 15 feet from front property line, east side, which placed it squarely near the boundary. I had always assumed it was entirely within my lot lines, but I had never seen the original survey. The uncertainty gnawed at me. If even a small portion of the tree was on her side, it could complicate things. But even then, an HOA citation for an unapproved tree seemed like an odd way to address a shared boundary issue. A sense of calculated determination replaced my initial anger. I wasn't going to let an arbitrary HOA rule, possibly instigated by a meddling neighbor, dictate what happened on my property, especially when it involved a beautiful, healthy tree. I needed facts, irrefutable evidence. My first call was not to the HOA, but to a professional land surveyor. I needed to know exactly where my property ended and Karen's began, down to the last inch. This wasn't just about a tree anymore. It was about defining boundaries, about asserting my rights as a homeowner against what felt like an escalating campaign of petty harassment. The game, I realized, had just changed, and I intended to play to win. The surveyor, a methodical man named Mr. Henderson with a weathered face and a quiet confidence, arrived 2 days later, his truck laden with tripods, measuring tapes, and an array of sophisticated GPS equipment. Watching him meticulously set up his instruments, driving stakes into the ground, and peering through his transit, a sense of calm began to settle over me. This was a professional process, an objective search for truth amidst the subjective chaos of HOA politics. Karen Fields, true to form, emerged from her house almost immediately. Her presence was as predictable as the sunrise. She stood on her perfect lawn, arms crossed, observing Mr. Henderson with a suspicious, almost accusatory glare. She didn't approach, didn't offer a greeting, just watched, a silent, disapproving sentinel. I offered her a polite nod, which she pointedly ignored, her gaze fixed on the surveyor as if he were engaged in some illicit activity. Her behavior only reinforced my growing conviction that she was somehow behind the HOA complaint. Why else would she be so intensely interested in a routine survey of my property? Mr. Henderson worked diligently for several hours, marking points with fluorescent orange spray paint and small flags. He moved with a practiced ease, his movements precise and unhurried. I stayed mostly out of his way, observing from a respectful distance, occasionally answering a question about the general layout of my property. The suspense was almost unbearable. Was the tree entirely on my land? Was it straddling the line? Or, worse, was it mostly on Karen's side, making this HOA complaint, however ridiculously worded, technically valid? Finally, Mr. Henderson straightened up, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He beckoned me over, a slight, almost imperceptible frown on his face. My heart thumped. "Mr. Jennings," he began, his voice low and professional. "I have some ding." He unrolled a large, detailed plat map, meticulously marked with lines, measurements, and notations. He pointed to the prominent trunk of the sugar maple. "Your original survey, and indeed the HOA's records, show your property line running precisely here." He traced a faint dotted line on the map. Then he pointed to where the actual survey stakes now stood. My eyes widened. The tree's trunk, a good 2/3 of its circumference, was clearly on my side of the newly verified property line. But, critically, a significant portion, about 1/3 of its base, along with a considerable spread of its roots and lower branches, extended into what was unequivocally Karen Field's property. "So, it's a boundary tree?" I asked, a mix of relief and a new kind of alarm washing over me. Relief that it wasn't entirely on her land, but alarm at the implications of a shared tree, especially with Karen. Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. "Precisely. The main part of the trunk is on your land, but a substantial portion is indeed on your neighbor's side. This explains why the original survey didn't show it as entirely yours, but also why the HOA would be confused. It's a common issue with older, established trees that grow across property lines over many years." He continued, his tone turning more serious. "However, what's more concerning, Mr. Jennings, is this." He pointed to an area on the map representing Karen's side of the property line, specifically around the base of the tree. "During my measurements, I observed a significant accumulation of mulch here." He indicated a large, shaded area on the map, "and evidence of extensive, somewhat aggressive, pruning of branches on your side of the tree, originating from her property. This is highly irregular for a boundary tree." My mind raced. The mulch, the trimming, it all clicked into place. Karen hadn't just been tidying up her side, she had been actively encroaching. The layers of mulch, year after year, could suffocate the tree's roots, potentially causing damage. And her aggressive pruning of branches on my side, branches that extended over the property line from her side, was not only unauthorized but could seriously compromise the tree's health and structural integrity. A boundary tree typically implies shared responsibility and, crucially, shared decision-making. Karen, it seemed, had taken unilateral action, assuming ownership of the portion of the tree on her land and extending her influence beyond it. "She's been dumping mulch and trimming branches on my side?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, a cold fury beginning to build. "Without my permission? For years?" "From what I can observe, yes," Mr. Henderson confirmed, his expression grave. "That constitutes trespassing and potentially property damage, especially if the mulching has affected the root collar or the pruning has been done improperly, which can certainly impact the tree's health." He handed me the detailed survey map, a tangible piece of evidence. "I'd advise you to consult with an arborist and a legal professional, Mr. Jennings. This is no longer just an HOA dispute." I stood there, the survey map clutched in my hand, the afternoon sun feeling suddenly harsh. The initial annoyance had transformed into a deep, righteous anger. This wasn't about a known-approved tree anymore. This was about Karen Fields, my seemingly fastidious neighbor, trespassing on my property, actively and intentionally damaging a shared natural resource, and then having the audacity to report me to the HOA for it. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. My introspection shifted. This wasn't just a petty neighbor dispute. It was a violation of my property rights, a deliberate act of interference. The HOA citation, a flimsy pretext, was merely a smokescreen for Karen's own culpability. She hadn't wanted to deal with a boundary tree and the shared responsibilities it entailed. She'd wanted to control it, to impose her will. And when that wasn't enough, she had resorted to underhanded tactics, even trying to force its removal. I looked at the beautiful maple, its leaves rustling gently in the breeze, unaware of the legal storm brewing around it. This tree, which had stood witness to decades of neighborhood life, was now at the heart of a dispute that went far beyond mere aesthetics. I was no longer just defending my right to have a tree. I was defending my property, my privacy, and my sense of justice. Karen Fields had picked the wrong fight, and I was about to show her just how wrong she was. The next phone call I made wasn't to a landscaper or even to the HOA. It was to an attorney. The attorney, Mr. Davies, was a calm, meticulous man in his late 40s with an almost uncanny ability to dissect complex situations into digestible legal strategies. I sat across from him in his tastefully appointed office, the surveyor's detailed map spread out between us, along with the damning HOA citation. I recounted the entire saga, from the baffling, non-approved tree notice to Mr. Henderson's startling discoveries about Karen's long-standing mulching and pruning habits. Mr. Davies listened patiently, interjecting with concise questions, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, a thoughtful expression settled on his face. "Mr. Jennings," he began, his voice even, "what you have here is not merely an HOA dispute, as you correctly assessed. This is a clear case of trespass and property damage. Your neighbor, Ms. Fields, has been, by your surveyor's findings, physically entering your property with mulch and performing unauthorized alterations to a tree that predominantly resides on your land. That is a significant legal distinction." He capped a finger on the survey map. "The fact that a portion of the tree is on her side does not grant her unilateral rights to manage it, especially not in a way that negatively impacts your larger portion of the tree or your property. Furthermore, the act of dumping mulch and trimming branches on your side, without your explicit permission, is a violation of your property lines, regardless of the tree's shared nature." "And the HOA complaint?" I asked, still smarting from the initial indignity. Mr. Davies chuckled softly. "That, Mr. Jennings, adds a rather ironic layer to her culpability. It suggests malice, an attempt to use the HOA as a weapon to achieve her own ends, while concealing her own wrongful actions. It will certainly not look good for her in court or to the HOA board once the full picture emerges." He outlined the legal strategy. First, we would formally notify Karen Fields of our intent to pursue legal action for trespass and property damage. This would include a demand to cease all unauthorized activities related to the tree and a request for compensation for the damages. Second, we would engage a certified arborist to conduct a thorough examination of the maple tree, assessing the extent of damage caused by the excessive mulching and improper pruning. This report would be crucial evidence for quantifying the damages. Finally, if Karen failed to respond satisfactorily, we would file a lawsuit. My introspection confirmed my resolve. This wasn't about vengeance, but about justice. It was about protecting my property, asserting my boundaries, and holding Karen accountable for her deceptive and damaging actions. I had endured her subtle criticisms and overt attempts to control the neighborhood aesthetic for too long. This was the line in the sand. The arborist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, was a no-nonsense woman with a deep passion for trees. She arrived a few days later, armed with soil probes, specialized cameras, and a keen eye. She spent hours meticulously examining the maple, from its outermost leaves down to its hidden root system. Karen, again, was a silent, simmering presence behind her curtain, no doubt observing every move. Dr. Reed's findings were damning. The excessive mulch piled around the base of the tree on Karen's side had indeed suffocated critical feeder roots on my side, leading to visible signs of stress in the upper canopy. The improper pruning, likely performed with blunt tools and without regard for proper tree health, had created gaping wounds on several large branches, leaving them susceptible to disease and insect infestation. She estimated that years of such treatment had significantly impacted the tree's vitality and structural integrity. Her report concluded that while the tree was not terminally damaged, it would require extensive professional care, including specialized aeration treatments, precise pruning to remove diseased wood, and ongoing monitoring to restore its health. The cost, she estimated, would be substantial, easily running into several $1,000s. Armed with Dr. Reed's comprehensive report and Mr. Henderson's undeniable survey, Mr. Davies sent a formal letter to Karen Fields. The letter was a detailed, meticulously footnoted document outlining the trespass, the property damage, and our intent to pursue legal action. It demanded immediate cessation of all unauthorized activities, compensation for the arborist's report, and a commitment to pay for the tree's restoration. The HOA citation, I learned, was included as an exhibit, highlighting the deceptive nature of her actions. The silence from Karen's end was deafening, for a few days at least. Then came the predictable but equally infuriating response from her own attorney, a terse letter denying all allegations, dismissing the survey as misleading and the arborist's report as exaggerated. It accused me of harassment and stated Karen would vigorously defend herself. It was a classic lawyerly deflection, but I wasn't deterred. I had the facts, the evidence, and the legal counsel to back me up. "It's going to court then," Mr. Davies said calmly, receiving Karen's lawyer's letter. "Are you prepared for that, Mr. Jennings? Litigation can be a lengthy and emotionally draining process." I looked out his window at the vibrant city below. My gaze hardened. "I'm prepared, Mr. Davies," I replied, my voice steady. "This isn't just about a tree. It's about what's right. Karen Fields tried to bully me, to damage my property, and then hide behind the HOA. She needs to be held accountable." The decision weighed on me. Yes, the thought of court battles, legal fees, and prolonged animosity with a neighbor was certainly not ideal. But the alternative, succumbing to her bullying and allowing her to continue her destructive behavior, was far worse. My conviction was clear. This maple, this grand old tree, was more than just wood and leaves. It was a symbol of my home, my boundaries, and my unwillingness to be pushed around. And for that, I would fight. The legal process, as Mr. Davies had warned, was a slow, grinding machine. Months unfolded, punctuated by exchanges of legal documents, discovery requests, and preliminary hearings. Each step felt like a deliberate, almost excruciatingly slow dance towards the inevitable confrontation. Karen Fields remained a phantom, never appearing in person for any of the initial proceedings, her legal team acting as her shield. I imagined her, cloistered in her house, convinced of her righteousness, while her lawyers constructed increasingly elaborate defenses. My focus remained steadfast. I meticulously gathered all correspondence from the HOA, dated photographs of the tree over the years, and any subtle evidence of Karen's mulching and trimming activities. Mr. Davies assured me that our case was strong, built on irrefutable evidence from the surveyor and the arborist. Yet, the emotional toll began to mount. The constant awareness of the legal battle, the underlying tension with Karen just across the property line, it all created a subtle but persistent hum of stress beneath the surface of my daily life. Neighbors, aware of the escalating dispute, began to offer quiet support. Some would stop me on my walks, offering words of encouragement, sharing their own minor grievances with the HOA or with Karen herself. It became clear that while Karen might have ruled with an iron fist, she wasn't particularly popular. Many saw her as a petty tyrant, and our case, in their eyes, was a much-needed pushback. This unexpected solidarity, a silent chorus of support, helped to bolster my resolve. Finally, the day for mediation arrived. This was a mandatory step before a full trial, an attempt to find a resolution outside of court. I walked into the neutral conference room, accompanied by Mr. Davies, feeling a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. Karen Fields was already there, seated at the opposite end of the long table, flanked by her two attorneys. She wore a severe pantsuit, her expression a rigid mask of defiance. Our eyes met for a brief, charged moment, and I saw not regret, but a hardened resentment. The mediator, a retired judge, attempted to facilitate a discussion, to find common ground. Mr. Davies presented our case succinctly, laying out the surveyor's findings, the arborist's report detailing the damage, and the pattern of trespass. He even subtly referenced the HOA complaint, subtly implying Karen's malicious intent. Karen's lead attorney, a slick-haired man named Mr. Peterson, then presented their defense. He argued that the tree was a shared resource, that Karen's actions were merely routine maintenance of her side of the property, and that any damage was pre-existing or negligible. He even tried to turn the tables, claiming my negligence in not maintaining the tree was the real issue. It was a flimsy attempt to deflect blame, utterly unconvincing in the face of the concrete evidence we possessed. Karen herself spoke only briefly, her voice tight with indignation, reiterating her belief that the tree was a nuisance and that she had every right to manage the portion on her land. She denied ever intending to harm the tree or trespass on my property, despite the documented evidence. Her self-serving narrative, however, rang hollow in the room. The mediation dragged on for hours, a repetitive cycle of accusation and denial. It became clear that Karen was unwilling to concede anything, entrenched in her belief that she had done no wrong. Her attorneys, perhaps realizing the weakness of their case, tried to offer a paltry settlement, a fraction of what the arborist estimated for repairs. I immediately rejected it. This wasn't about a small sum of money. It was about the principle. "We have reached an impasse," the mediator finally announced, sounding weary. "It appears this matter will proceed to trial." A sigh of resignation escaped me, mixed with a renewed sense of purpose. Going to trial was daunting, but I knew, deep down, that it was the only way to achieve true justice. Karen's unwavering defiance only solidified my resolve. The trial date arrived, ushered in by a cool, overcast morning, mirroring the somber mood I felt as I walked into the courthouse. The air in the courtroom was thick with a palpable tension, a hushed reverence before the legal drama began. My stomach fluttered with a mix of nerves and a strange, almost exhilarating sense of determination. This was it. The culmination of months of frustration, meticulous planning, and unwavering conviction. Karen Fields was already seated at the defense table, looking stern and unyielding. She avoided my gaze, staring straight ahead, her posture rigid. Her legal team exuded an air of practiced confidence, though I knew, thanks to Mr. Davies' assurances, that their hand was weaker than they let on. The proceedings began, a methodical dance of legal arguments, witness testimonies, and the presentation of evidence. Mr. Davies, with his calm demeanor and sharp intellect, presented our case with clarity and precision. He called Mr. Henderson, the land surveyor, who, with the aid of enlarged maps and clear explanations, unequivocally established the precise property line and the tree's position spanning both properties. His testimony was irrefutable, leaving no doubt about the fact that a significant portion of the tree, and indeed the mulch and pruning activity, occurred squarely on my side of the line. Next, Dr. Evelyn Reed, the arborist, took the stand. She was a compelling witness, explaining in layman's terms the delicate ecosystem of a tree, the critical role of the root collar, and how the sustained dumping of mulch had essentially suffocated the tree's vital roots on my car. Property. She used diagrams to illustrate the improper pruning techniques, detailing how the severe cuts left gaping wounds susceptible to disease. Her testimony painted a vivid picture of a tree struggling, silently suffering, due to deliberate human interference. She then presented her detailed cost estimates for the necessary restorative work, totaling over $7,000. The defense, led by Mr. Peterson, tried to discredit our witnesses, questioning the accuracy of the survey, suggesting Dr. Reed's findings were speculative. But their cross-examinations faltered against the expert's professional authority and the concrete data. They attempted to shift blame, implying I had somehow neglected the tree myself, or that a boundary tree inherently meant Karen could do whatever she pleased on her side. Mr. Davies deftly countered these arguments, citing legal precedents regarding shared property and the duty not to harm a shared resource. Then came the moment for my testimony. I spoke clearly, calmly, recounting my discovery of the HOA notice, my confusion, my decision to hire a surveyor, and the subsequent revelations. I described the gradual accumulation of mulch, the sound of her landscaper's trimming, always on my side of the tree, never suspecting malicious intent until the citation arrived. My voice was steady, reflecting not anger, but a deep sense of betrayal and a desire for justice. I explained the emotional distress of having my property rights violated and witnessing the slow decline of a beloved ancient tree due to my neighbor's actions. When Karen Fields finally took the stand, her composure visibly frayed. She maintained her denial, insisting she had only ever performed routine maintenance on her property and that the tree was a nuisance that dropped leaves and obscured her view. She claimed I was simply overreacting and that the lawsuit was an act of harassment. Under Mr. Davies's probing cross-examination, however, her answers became defensive, her justifications thin. When pressed about the HOA citation, her face visibly reddened and she stumbled over her words, unable to logically explain why she would report my tree for being non-approved when her own actions were demonstrably damaging it. Her attempts to portray herself as a victim fell flat. The final arguments were presented. Mr. Davies emphasized the clear evidence of trespass and property damage, the malice inferred from the HOA complaint, and the need for accountability. Mr. Peterson, for the defense, made a last-ditch effort to minimize Karen's actions, portraying them as a misunderstanding, an innocent attempt to maintain her property. The judge, a stern but fair arbiter, retired to deliberate. The waiting was excruciating, each minute stretching into an eternity. I sat beside Mr. Davies, my hands clasped, my gaze fixed on the courtroom doors. Karen, at her table, looked pale, her usual rigid posture slightly slumped. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. My heart pounded in my chest. In the case of Jennings versus Fields, the judge began, his voice resonating through the quiet room. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Michael Jennings. A wave of profound relief, pure and exhilarating, washed over me. I felt a lightness in my chest, a release of months of pent-up tension. Mr. Davies offered a discreet, congratulatory nod. The judge continued, outlining his reasoning. He cited the irrefutable evidence from the surveyor proving trespass and the arborist's detailed report confirming property damage caused by Karen's unauthorized actions. He also made a point of noting the troubling nature of Ms. Fields' HOA complaint, viewing it as an attempt to divert attention from her own culpability. The verdict was clear. Karen Fields was ordered to pay for all costs associated with the restoration of the maple tree, as outlined by the arborist's report, totaling over $7,000. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees and court costs. Furthermore, she was permanently enjoined from any further unauthorized interference with the tree or my property. It was a complete and undeniable victory. I glanced at Karen. Her face was ashen, her jaw slack. The rigid mask of defiance had crumbled, replaced by a look of shock and utter disbelief. She had lost. Spectacularly. The neighborhood's self-appointed arbiter of rules had been exposed and defeated, not by an angry confrontation, but by the cold, hard facts of property law. As the judge concluded the proceedings, I felt a sense of vindication, not just for myself, but for the tree, for the principle of property rights, and perhaps for all those who had ever been subjected to petty, arbitrary rules. The maple, my magnificent, resilient maple, would finally get the care it deserved. And Karen Fields, through her own misguided actions, had paid the ultimate price for her arrogance. The aftermath of the trial was a period of both profound relief and quiet satisfaction. The legal victory, while emotionally taxing, brought with it a renewed sense of peace and a clear vindication of my stand. The formal judgment was delivered, and Karen Fields, through her attorneys, was compelled to comply with the court's order. This meant paying the significant sum for the tree's restoration, as well as my accrued legal fees, a financial sting that, I imagined, must have been particularly bitter for her. The most immediate and tangible effect of the judgment was the arrival of Dr. Evelyn Reed and her team of professional arborists. They spent several days meticulously working on the maple tree. They carefully aerated the compacted soil around its base, introducing nutrient-rich compost and establishing a proper drainage system to counteract the years of suffocating mulch. They performed delicate, corrective pruning, removing the improperly cut branches and expertly shaping the canopy to promote healthy growth and balance. It was a slow, painstaking process, akin to surgery for a giant living organism. As I watched them work, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the tree's resilience. Its leaves, once showing signs of stress, slowly began to regain their vibrant luster. The gaping wounds from Karen's misguided pruning were expertly treated, sealed to prevent disease. The tree, my tree, was on the path to recovery, poised to flourish once more, a living testament to a battle won. Karen Fields during this time became even more of a recluse. Her curtains remained permanently drawn, her house a silent, shuttered fortress. The sight of the arborists working on the tree, a constant, undeniable reminder of her defeat, must have been excruciating for her. I rarely saw her car, and her landscapers, who had once been so diligent, were notably absent. It was as if her entire world had shrunk, retreating from the public eye. The ripples of the lawsuit extended beyond our two properties. News of the judgment spread rapidly through Hemlock Estates, fueled by word of mouth, and, eventually, a brief, factual report in the local community newsletter that simply stated, "A recent court decision involving a boundary tree has prompted a review of HOA landscaping guidelines." This understated announcement belied the tectonic shift it caused within the homeowners association. The HOA board, under pressure from numerous homeowners who had followed the case with keen interest, was forced to confront the shortcomings of their existing rules. The fact that a long-standing tree could be cited as known approved and that a neighbor's trespassing and damage could go unchecked under their current framework highlighted a glaring inadequacy. My victory, particularly the judge's comments about the troubling nature of Karen's complaint, served as a powerful catalyst for change. Over the next few months, I heard from several homeowners that the HOA meetings became markedly more contentious. The old guard, those who had long supported Karen's strict interpretations of the rules, found themselves increasingly isolated. New voices emerged, advocating for clearer, more reasonable guidelines, particularly concerning shared property lines and existing natural features. The discussions were detailed, often heated, and, surprisingly, open. Ultimately, the HOA did indeed rewrite its boundary guidelines. The new provisions were far more explicit, outlining clear procedures for dealing with shared trees, emphasizing the need for mutual consent for any significant alterations, and, crucially, making it abundantly clear that trespass onto a neighbor's property, regardless of the reason, was a serious violation. They even added a clause encouraging mediation for neighborly disputes before resorting to formal complaints, a subtle nod to the ordeal I had been through. The days of arbitrary citations and unchecked interference were, hopefully, over. My relationship with my other neighbors deepened. The shared experience of the block party had opened lines of communication, and the lawsuit, in a strange way, solidified those bonds. They saw me not just as the guy with the big tree, but as someone who stood up for what was right, who challenged an oppressive system. I received more anonymous thank you notes, small gifts, and even invitations to backyard barbecues than I ever had before. The community felt more connected, more united against overreaching authority. Life settled into a new rhythm. The majestic maple, now vibrant and healthy, cast its cooling shade over my lawn. Its leaves, in autumn, burst into a breathtaking array of reds and golds, a silent, triumphant display. I would often sit on my porch, enjoying the quiet beauty of my yard, and glance over at Karen's house. Her curtains remained drawn most of the time, her property meticulously maintained, but without the zealous, almost aggressive perfection it once possessed. The invisible wall that had once felt so thick between our homes had, if not crumbled entirely, at least developed a significant crack. I never saw Karen Fields again in any meaningful interaction. No more terse exchanges about hedges, no more pointed stares. She seemed to exist in her own sphere, forever isolated by her choices. But the tree remained, a living monument to the principle that sometimes, standing firm against a perceived injustice, even over something as seemingly small as a non-approved tree, can lead to profound and lasting change. It taught me that property lines are not just lines on a map, they are boundaries of respect, privacy, and peaceful coexistence. And that, I realized, was a lesson worth fighting for.